Is this the fossilized skull of a giant mystery ape? I get a lot of comments on my videos asking about this particular skull. What is it? Where did it come from? So I decided I need to do a video on this skull because it actually has a pretty interesting backstory. A couple of years ago, I was very interested in an extinct hominid called Meganthropus paleojavanicus. For those of you that don't know what Meganthropus is, pretty much neither do the paleoanthropologists. There is still a lot of debate around what Meganthropus actually was. In Java, there were fossils uncovered that were unlike any other hominid from that area. They got fragments of jawbone and molars and also some fragments of the cranium. These were classified as Homo erectus, but much bigger. Even recently, when more fossils were uncovered, they were still ascribed to Homo erectus, even though they were so much bigger. In fact, if Meganthropus was a type of Homo erectus, which walked bipedally, it would have been around 8 feet tall. This is a replica of a fragment of jawbone that was found and attributed to Meganthropus. Now this is an early human. This isn't Homo erectus, but it is still early Homo sapiens. And you can see the size difference. So that would have sit around there. Even the size of the molars is insane compared to a human's. Much, much bigger. But anatomically, it was very similar to Homo erectus. So even up until about 2019, it was still classified as a large Homo erectus. I was obsessed with Meganthropus. I was buying fossils left, right, and center in the hopes that it might be a Meganthropus fossil. These fossils were legally collected from private land, so it's not fossil poachers going out there and just raiding fossil sites. I was in contact with quite a few Indonesian fossil sellers, and they knew I was looking for early hominin fossils. And eventually, I got sent a video of this specimen right here. Straight off the bat, I knew that there were some problems with this skull. I can tell straight away that these aren't the original teeth. The tooth placement for a hominid is all wrong on this skull. But I figured maybe it's just a restoration. Maybe the skull itself has a lot of original fossil material still on it, but they've just basically made a composite, which means it's a fossil that is made up from multiple different parts. So maybe they tried to restore this skull by attaching teeth that don't belong to this skull. So I bought it. This skull is really heavy. A lot of fossils this size are. They're basically just rock now. The organic material that makes up the bone has been replaced with minerals, so it's basically just rock now. When this skull arrived, it was smashed into a million pieces, which devastated me. Absolutely devastated me. I remember picking the box up and going, no. I could tell just from touching the box that it was broken. I didn't realize how broken it was until I opened the box, and basically the only thing that was left intact was the cranium part. Everything below the brow ridge was shattered. But I persevered. I decided this might be a good opportunity for me to get experience putting a fossil back together. It was no easy task. In fact, I still have a container full of leftover bits that I couldn't find where they went. But it was cool because I started putting it together. I was learning anatomy as I was assembling it. The more I started to assemble and reconstruct this skull, the more I started questioning the legitimacy of this particular fossil. There are things that are very anatomically correct with this fossil. For example, it has a very distinct foramen magnum, and the placement of that foramen magnum is where it should be for an animal that walked bipedally. It's not at the back of the cranium, it's right there and center, just like a human. So that's where the neck vertebrae attaches to the skull, and all the spinal cord runs through that. So that looked correct for an animal that walked bipedally. There's definitely parts of this skull that are fossilized bone. It looked so legitimate, yet there were still things wrong with it and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Of course the teeth aren't correct. They aren't in the right spot. There's too few molars. The incisors aren't where they should be. But I was stumped as to what was real and what was restored. I decided to do a little bit more digging. I was part of a WhatsApp group that were a lot of Indonesian fossil sellers, and more of these started coming up for sale. And a lot of them looked absolutely ridiculous. To the point where no animal with a skull like that could ever exist. And I was looking at this one, and this skull actually does resemble the restored skull of a Meganthropus paleojarvanicus. Look at it from the side and compare that to this skull. This is a Meganthropus skull compared to this. The cranium shape is very similar. There's no sagittal crest. The maxilla does extend out the front, kind of like a snout. So it kind of looks like the mix between a human and an ape. There is obviously fossilized bone that makes up this skull. So I'm like, how did they do it? And what is real and what is fake? I did a lot of digging, and there are Indonesian fossil sellers that I do trust, and I have gotten quite a few fossils from, megalodon teeth and similar. And they have never tried to sell me one of these skulls, so I asked them, how do they make these skulls? Apparently, the actual real fossilized bone material of these skulls are made from stegodon bones. So the stegodon is an extinct species of elephant that was found in that area. And they find fossils of these stegodons quite often. Allegedly, they shape and polish those fossilized stegodon bones and somehow build a skull like this out of those fossils. I'm not even mad. I am blown away at the genius and the craftsmanship that went into something like this. This is all allegedly. I don't know for sure. They're very secretive about it. But there is still mystery behind whether or not there is actual real Meganthropus skull in this composite. I don't know. Nobody could give me a straight answer. I'm trying to figure out, like, what part of the stegodon is this bit? What part of the stegodon is that bit? The entire facial region is all one piece. There's no real evidence of machining on this face area. I can see differences in parts of the skull to where maybe they've used a matrix of some sort, so like a concrete sort of paste to attach things. But this entire maxilla area and these orbital bones are all one solid piece. They haven't been glued together. They haven't been cut. So there is still a mystery behind these skulls. How much is stegodon? How much is concrete? Is there any actual Meganthropus in this skull? I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever know. But I do know the teeth are probably pig's teeth. I'm pretty positive that this skull isn't a Meganthropus skull or a primate skull in general. But there is still mystery behind it. I am still not 100% sure exactly how they made this skull and what it consists of. Let's go back to what Meganthropus is. They did think originally that it was a Homo erectus, just a bigger type. So back in 2019, they did an analysis on a molar tooth from a Meganthropus, and they found that it is not a Homo erectus. It's not even a different species of Homo erectus. It's actually its own genus, Meganthropus. And it is closer to a hominid rather than a hominin. Obviously, hominins are hominids. There is a lot of confusion about that. There are a lot of people commenting that humans aren't actually apes because we're hominins, not hominids. You have to be a hominid in order to be a hominin. You've got a family. which is Hominidae. That is the family of apes. There's humans, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos. Then a subfamily of that Hominidae family is Homininae, which is the human lineage. And chimpanzees are also part of that subfamily, Homininae, and also the human lineage, Australopithecus, Paranthropus, Homo erectus, Homo naledi, things like that. So humans are hominids. We are apes, but we are a subfamily of apes, the human subfamily. And then you got the orangutan subfamily, which is Ponginae. Simple rule of thumb, if it has "nae" on the end, it's a subfamily. If it has "day" at the end, it's the family. So Meganthropus probably isn't in the Homininae subfamily. It is a hominid, but it probably isn't in the human lineage of hominids. What did the Meganthropus look like? Originally, when they thought it was a type of Homo erectus, it was depicted as being an 8-foot, basically human. If you picture a caveman walking around 8 feet tall, that's what they thought Meganthropus looked like. Now, there are very few renditions of what Meganthropus probably looked like, but again, they do think it walked bipedally and they do think it was closer to looking like an ape rather than a human, which is pretty damn cool. Imagine an 8-foot ape walking around, probably bipedally. Although it wasn't as big as, for example, Gigantopithecus, it was still 2/3 the size of Gigantopithecus, making this the second largest ape that we know of that ever existed. So that is the mystery behind this alleged ape skull and the whole backstory. It's pretty interesting. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you think this is a legitimate Meganthropus skull? Do you think it is partly Meganthropus? Or do you think the entire thing is completely fake? Let me know. On my next video, I'm going to compare Meganthropus to Gigantopithecus and how that can relate to Bigfoot in North America. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope it answered some of your questions regarding this particular skull, and I'll see you next time on another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Take care, everyone.